Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining Encore's special event, the first in our Words of Wisdom series. Today's topic is managing intergenerational work teams. Karen Roberts, our resident HR professional and advisory board member, will be introducing our special guest. Karen, it's all yours.
Thank you, Christine, and welcome everybody. We are delighted to have you here with us today to share words of wisdom from our special guest, Brian Altschuler. I'm going to give you a brief overview of Brian for those of you who may not know him. He currently serves as the Vice President of Ancillary Operations, which means he oversees almost everything the hospital does in terms of operational activities. He's been with Boca Raton Regional Hospital since 2007. However, many of you may know that Boca Raton Hospital is now part of Baptist Health South Florida. And Brian will be talking a little bit more about that. Prior to joining now Baptist Health South Florida, Brian played an integral role in leadership and staff development at two other local hospitals, Palms West and also Bethesda Healthcare Systems. Before that, he was with Marriott International for 10 years and also had roles at Walt Disney World Resorts. Brian received his Master of Science in Management with a focus on leadership from Nova Southeastern University. He is an adjunct professor at Lynn University and holds the SPHR Senior Professional in Human Resources certification. During his career, Brian has earned numerous awards and honors, most recently 2018 Excellence in Human Resources Award from the South Florida Business and Wealth magazine, and also in 2018 was named Wellbeing 100 Award from Corporate Health and Wellness Association. Brian believes that passion, energy, and drives are musts in everything you do as a leader. Brian his hobbies include photography, cycling, and exploring new cultures, and he loves discovering new off the beaten path restaurants that offer some amazing food. So Brian, we are so thrilled to have you here today. We know the job of a vice president of ancillary operations during these past few months has been rather busy. So thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. And I'd like to just have you please share some of your thoughts with us today, and then later we'll ask a few questions. So welcome, Brian.
Thank you very much, Karen. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today, and it's nice to see so many faces that I am familiar with and a lot of new faces, and having people be so open introducing themselves earlier. But it is truly a pleasure to be with you all. And you know, when Karen gave me this topic and we were kind of looking at putting it together when we were meeting, you know, it really is something that I'm very passionate about, because however you look at diversity and look at the workforces and look at how we all interact with each other, and how even the workforce is changing, and it's just ever more so flowing out into the balance of work and life, and how people are remote and where people are even logging into today, and how people are communicating with each other. This whole intergenerational workforce, you know, has just become really a topic of high focus. And how do you engage everybody and keep everybody engaged and working well together? And then you layer that in with you know, a global pandemic, and it is really a mixture for an interesting recipe. So I'm thrilled to be here today, and I do want to kind of keep it as informal as we can. It's my personality, so I'm glad Karen will have some questions at the end of this. But if somebody, you know, does have a question and they want to you know, engage, I certainly welcome that. But Karen, you know, I'm always humbled. You know, we're talking about, you know, mature workers, and we're talking about all the different generations. But you know, listen to even you read my bio, and I'm humbled because if you know me, I'm, even putting something like that together for me is interesting, because I try to live in the presence, and I really value and appreciate all the things that have built me to this point and have brought me to this point. And it is not a straight lane to go from hospitality. I did EMS to end up back in healthcare, and kind of hit a couple curves through that in my career. I think really has, and is a point I want to make, has really kind of made me a value to organizations. From being at Palms West to then moving, over here to Boca Regional and making a stop before at Bethesda. Bethesda and Boca are now part of the same healthcare system. So some of those experiences and some of those relationships that I had at my prior hospital at Bethesda have really helped me today in this integration and this merger that we've gone through for the last year and a half. The interesting thing with this merger too that we've gone through with Baptist Health of South Florida is, prior to it, I had sole responsibility for HR operations and worked with a counterpart at the executive level at that point. And then with the merger, we've really kind of morphed into HR being more of a function based out of Miami, and having entity liaisons such as myself and people who are focusing on other key things. And my role has really transitioned a lot too into covering, like you had mentioned in the bio, a lot of operations and a lot of what goes on in the hospital that's other than nursing and other than our chief medical officer with our physicians. So it keeps me busy in a day, and certainly having a workforce that can respond to it is very important. And so I'm going to kind of focus my comments today a lot on some of the things that we do here at Baptist Health South Florida, that we've been doing here at Boca Raton Regional, and kind of morph in a little bit of how COVID's impacted a lot of those. So I hope that'll be interesting to everybody today, and that's kind of my goal. But I kind of want to start off with something interesting, because again, when we're talking about a mature workforce, there's nothing more personable than sharing a story of your own. Well, on February 10th, my dad turned 80. And I am very fortunate that both of my parents are still alive today. But my dad is 80 and believe it or not, still very active in the workforce today. He is up in New York City, which has been obviously a hot spot of the whole, COVID piece of this, right? One of the cities that has been hit hard at times. And my dad works as a lawyer. I'm very proud of him. He had built many, many years ago what is called landlord and tenant practice, an L&T practice in Manhattan. And obviously, as Manhattan grew, you can imagine with rentals and all the condos and all the commercial buildings and everything else in Manhattan, so did his practice. And I always knew my dad was going to kind of be one of those guys that was going to be somebody who worked as long as he physically and mentally could. And at 80, I'm very fortunate to say he's blessed to be able to still do that. And I'm very fortunate that he's still very active as a dad to me and as a father. But just a little while ago, a few months back, my dad, because he insisted on still being part of his practice, as dedicated as he is, was still working 4 out of 5 days a week at his practice in Manhattan. Actually did come down with COVID, and we had to kind of help him realize he had to take it easy and get himself better. And luckily he did do that. And he's doing well at this point. But I was sharing with Karen, yes, that is good news, because at 80, he had me very worried. But he did fully recover. And I've now been talking to him, and I think convinced him that maybe 3 days in Manhattan and 1 day remote and the rest off for the week. But I was explaining to Karen, I wanted to share a little bit about my dad, because one of the components I kind of wanted to start talking about here today was, valuing, mature workers in the workforce, and using my dad as an example of this, because obviously wearing an HR hat over the years, my dad and I have had a lot of conversations about people and leadership and people management. And the most interesting conversations I've had with my dad are actually about him and his own situation. So I told you, many years ago, my dad helped build this practice in Manhattan, and the kind of volume that the practice has generated. And I'm proud to say my dad has always been a very respected senior now partner of that firm. And you know, the whole legal industry, like healthcare, and sometimes I think this does impact this whole intergenerational workforce, and sometimes how mature workers are viewed, can be perceived in a very conservative way, right? You know, even, you know, I look at healthcare and I kind of use healthcare and legal industries as examples, and just simply saying traditionally, I think they're modeled more conservatively. And I think companies such as like Baptist Health of South Florida, and even prior when we were Boca Raton Regional as a standalone, I think organizations and entities that look at their traditional structures and realize they have to be morphed and adaptable and flexible to meet the different needs of the generations, truly allow themselves to reinvent themselves and become more successful. So over the years, my dad would talk to me about how even as a partner, he had a contract with the law firm. And after, you know, so many years, he was due to retire out of the law firm. And part of that's understandable, right? You have younger generations that are coming up and are eager to be promoted and are eager to be higher earners and are interested in getting to those higher level spots in that kind of structure. But there's such a level of expertise, and we talk about that, and I want to make sure I stress that here in this conversation too. And one of the things that we actually have as one of our core values here at Baptist Health South Florida is valuing the experts, right? You know, we can't all be good at everything. I wear a lot of hats here in the organization. If I counted them, I'd probably have roughly about 9 different areas that either directly report into me or have a dotted line to me and have some corporate responsibility as well. And if I tried to say to you today on this phone, I was an expert in all of those areas, I wouldn't be being authentic with you. I wouldn't be being transparent. You have to really rely on experts. And I think a lot of times, right, it makes sense. You're not going to graduate out of university or college and be an expert in any area. You may have a good basis of academic knowledge. You may have a good even basis of maybe you worked yourself through college. But if you compared yourself to a more mature worker, I think we can all predominantly, maybe not in every circumstance, but predominantly say just years of experience are going to make you more of an expert. You know, before some of you got on the Zoom today, I was joking with Christine and Karen, and I was just really saying how good it was to see them. And then we realized Christine and I had a connection. I kept looking at her thinking she looks familiar to me. And it just got to the point of, you know, talking about how many years ago that was. And I said, you know, I think I'm one of the best me's right now in this stage of life. And I think that's because of the relationships, the years of different experiences I've had, and the fact that I've probably been able to navigate because of experience through a lot of personal things I've gone through and professional things I've gone through. And Karen got me at the beginning of this week when we were trying to do this on a couple of different days where I literally was trying to help find beds for sick patients. We were just so busy with we joke here in Florida, we call them snow levels to have a little bit of fun. And they're just really an acronym for seasonal notification of overflowing. You know, in the hotel industry, Amy, we used to be able to have a guest show up at the front desk and walk them to another hotel. It doesn't work in the hospital that way. There's something called EMTALA, and we would be violating a very big regulation if people showed up at our door and we said, nah, we can't help you. Sorry, we got to find you another hospital. Here, you got to find a bed, and you got to figure out how you're going to go ahead and either discharge patients safely that can go home or go to another facility that's at an appropriate level of care, or you have to open overflow areas that can be secondary inpatient units. So Karen got me on those days, and again, being authentic, you can imagine anyone that would be a little bit of a level of stress, and you know, you're trying to be supportive of family members and the patients and everything else, and do your regular routine items. And you know, I was talking to Karen, and she's known me for years, so she knows probably when I'm really up and when I'm really trying to figure out how to navigate through a situation I'm currently handling. But I have to say, even through that, and you know, Patricia, I kind of go back to you even getting on these Zooms. I thank Karen actually for taking time to speak to me that day, and just actually worked out to be perfect timing, because literally talking to her and even allowing her, whether she intended to or realized it, really giving me her words of wisdom and her expertise really helped me hang up after that call and feel energized again. Because one, I was talking about a topic I love, this whole intergenerational kind of workforce, and talking about, like I said, in a sense, the diversity of that, and talking to a good friend and really being reminded that, you know what, you have the tools to do this, Brian, you can make this happen, and hung up and really had a much better afternoon with it. So I'm going to morph back to my dad. So over the years, I've talked to my dad a lot, like I said, and his firm with their contracts would say to him a lot of times, I think he was actually the first time due to retire out at 65. So I told you my dad is 80. So that's 15 years past his original retire out date. And the way it works in law firms a lot of times is because people, again, in the younger generations want to keep moving up and do stuff. They try to get the more senior, more highly compensated leaders to contractually go out. It's already all agreed. It's pre-negotiated. My dad is probably still today one of the highest, and I was saying this to Karen, is still probably one of the highest revenue generators for the law firm. His expertise in the city of New York, you can imagine, is really valued. And at 80, while some people, I'm sure, and primarily probably even in the practice, look at my dad as an 80-year-old man who probably should have retired 15 years ago, I hope if some of those younger professionals got the chance to really speak to my dad and hear his words of wisdom and understand how he built that practice and how he still is one of the highest revenue generators for them and still goes into court right now because of COVID. They're doing a lot on Zoom and still, articulates his own cases and what he does in the front of his practice. And what is seen is tremendous, let alone when they're in meetings and guiding the growth of the practice today and talking about practice and policy and how they're going to grow the firm and how even they've had to morph through COVID and where there have been some rental protections in the city and it's affected some of their business, how they've had to morph and do other things. My dad's gone through how many years of different recessions and different downtimes for their business and different business interruption periods. Their firm was not too far from, sadly, where 9/11 took place, and all of those things that when a global pandemic comes back up and you have all that business interruption again, his experience of going through that prior is invaluable. And when we sometimes just automatically exit that expertise, I think we really put sometimes our businesses at risk. And, I've talked to him a lot about how to present his case. And then, the proof is, right, 15 years later, my dad is still working. And now I'm going the other way with him. Now I'm saying to him, Dad, now I think it's time that we start having the conversations of, is 4 days necessary? Can we go to 3? Can you negotiate with me and get down to 3 so that I know you're doing some of these other things to enjoy new chapters in your life as well? But I share that very personal story because, again, I feel like to be a better professional in any capacity, it starts out about being a good person and about having a balanced life and having a good perspective. And when we're dealing with our family and friends and we're able to remember that old saying, treat others as you'd want to be treated, I think when we put a lot of our practices together, in our professional environments and follow those same principles, it really helps us. Karen was asking me a lot about our hospital here. So our hospital is about 400 beds. We are about to go under a major expansion and build a new bed tower. So we have completely private rooms here and really have some very sophisticated services. We have a very extensive neurological hospital within a hospital. We've actually, about within the last 6 months, gotten classified as not just a specialty stroke center, but a comprehensive stroke center. So what that basically means is in Palm Beach County, some people are familiar, there's trauma centers. So we have 2 trauma centers in Palm Beach County. They're Delray Medical Center on the south end of the county. The spread line is Southern Boulevard, and to the north of Southern Boulevard, if God forbid something were to happen that required that classification of hospital, you would go up to St. Mary's. Well, in the county, Boca Regional is now not only a designated stroke center, but is a comprehensive stroke center, which means we do some very advanced procedures here. And what that does is enable emergency medical services to bypass other hospitals to bring patients requiring very special attention to us. So I'm trying to give you an idea of our hospital. We're going through a lot of technical, a lot of sophisticated programmatic growth. You can imagine that also increases our number of employees that we need. So, you know, when we were standalone, probably our highest count was getting up to about 2,600 employees. We're over 3,000 employees now that are employed with our healthcare system. So we're a large employer. We are employing employees that are of all ages, look all different, come from different backgrounds. And to me, as a senior leader, I find that extremely rewarding to be a part of. I am actually our champion here on the entity level, and I sit on the corporate committee for all of Baptist Health of South Florida for diversity and inclusion. And I expressed this to Karen. I was most proud of Baptist because they started a lot of their programs before they were the buzzwords, before even the most recent and sad things have happened with Black lives and with women's rights and all these things. Baptist had already been on board with a lot of these key things. And I was proud to be able to be asked to join the corporate group and help start our larger entity diversion and inclusion committee. Several years back, our entity diversion and inclusion committee started actually as an LGBTQ piece where we were really trying to make sure in our community we were providing care to everybody and that we were promoting environments where everybody could come to our hospital and be part of receiving, again, open, you know, great care clinically and really feel comfortable that our practitioners were trained to meet their needs. We do that with every patient population. You know, also in Boca Raton, we have a lot of senior population, and we really work to make sure that we're connecting seniors who may live alone and maybe their families are not in Florida, and how do we communicate with them? How do we advocate for them? How do we really remember as an executive team here that sometimes we become people's extended families? And really the hospital has, to begin with, a very strong focus on, and again, a word I'm going to use, inclusion of everybody. It's not about this group or that group or an age demographic. It's really about, and starting with employment, that everybody feels a part of what we're doing here in the organization. So I'm proud of that, and I'll explain some of the diversity and inclusion pieces as we kind of continue the conversation. The other part I'm going to interweave in here is, you know, we really have also learned that we're a little unique to Baptist Health of South Florida. The hospital, when it was a standalone hospital, and this is another area that I've been really proud to support, has a league called Debbie Rand Service Memorial League. Now, while a volunteer entity, they are a separate corporation, believe it or not, or separate LLC, limited liability corporation. They literally exist to raise funds and support this hospital here in Boca Raton. With that, we have one of the strongest cadres of volunteers, nearly 1,000, primarily mature adults who come from every background of industry. So they come from industries, finance. The gentleman who is the board president now had his own business in Lower Manhattan where he was in the garment district and would provide high-end materials for many designers in New York and in that area. This man is one of the most fascinating individuals to talk to. And just the sense of how he's able to lead the board of this league. And I sit as their administrative liaison on that board and help to advise and do things is just fascinating. And the experience in the years of running a business really help our hospital to the point of our volunteers literally help support about 90 different functions on an average basis here in the hospital. So that prevents us from having to sometimes find labor that's not available or simply literally provides us with additional support in key areas we may not otherwise financially be able to do. And these volunteers literally come, like I said, from every background and provide us literally with anything from, acting as greeters to acting as fundraisers to acting as, ambassadors for us in our emergency department. When we're busy, we have what we call our clinical partner position, and they are really able to communicate and articulate after they've received training on what a patient is going to experience in the emergency room. So instead of a nurse, let's say, being in the room, spending a lot of time explaining to a patient, hey, you're going to, the doctor's ordered a test, here's what you're going to do. The nurse will explain that, of course, to a patient, but sometimes patient is nervous and wants companionship or company. And we'll use these care partners who are, again, primarily all these mature adults, excuse me, to come in the emergency department and kind of act as support, and sometimes act as advocacy and help keep a patient engaged in what's going on with them, and help family members who might be out in waiting rooms pre-COVID, or maybe helping to us to communicate, what's going on. They're of huge value, and we have patient, volunteer positions all over our hospital and our inpatient units pre-COVID, of course, again, and we're starting to make plans to bring people back as numbers decrease. They do an amazing job for us and bring, again, a lot of value in just even doing that. If you look at our paid workforce, one of the interesting things that has happened over the last several years is we've, again, continued to introduce millennials and now generation, Y and Z into the workforce. We used to say, and I was joking with Karen the other day, I would give people career advice and they would say to me, Brian, how long, if I take this position, I see this as a building block, how long do you think I'm going to need to stay in this role? And, the answer I used to give people most of the time was, you really need to have a solid 5 years in a position to really be able to say, you reinvented the position, you've developed the policies and procedures, you've seen them through, and you've really helped to grow them, right? Well, we know a lot of the younger workforce today is again, very fluid. If I looked at some of my counterparts that are on this call, probably a lot of them would say, we'd be lucky to probably keep some of our younger workforce, maybe 24 to 36 months at this point. And that would be considered probably, and for some of them, a long period of time. So, we were talking about it. And when Karen and I were talking, we were talking about the other end of things, a more mature workforce and somebody who may, have 5 or 10 years to work and is looking for paid employment. And one of the most interesting things when I thought about when we were having that conversation and I looked at our senior leader structure here in the organization, we're growing, I told you. This whole North region for Baptist Health of South Florida is new. When I look at a lot of the individuals that they've hired for senior positions, and a lot of them requiring a lot of expertise and a lot of strategic thinking, they are all a mature workforce. And most of the individuals, and there's quite a number, there's about 3 or 4 that I know right off the top of my head, 2 of them in our finance area, our lead in our whole corporate construction division, and 1 in our operations area are all mature adults and truthfully are somewhere within 5 or 10 years, most likely, of retiring. The CEO here at Boca Raton Regional Hospital, if you look at his profile, Mr. Lincoln Mendez, this is his 3rd hospital with his leadership, and he is more at the tenure of his career. But with this whole transition and integration into Baptist Health of South Florida, he is a prime example of why a more mature leader with experience, for him with Baptist Health of South Florida, none with us, and quite honestly, most of it down in the Miami market, not within this market in Boca Raton, really was the right decision, because he was able to bring the expertise of helping us culturally form into Baptist Health of South Florida. He knew what that culture in Miami looked like. And then leaders like myself and a couple others that are up here already really understand our hospital and understand our market. So that blend of experience really had helped us have a very successful 18-month transition. I don't share my age often, but it's not for any other reason than I really don't have a platform to, but you know, I am 50 and I just turned 50 in February, and I am probably the youngest executive on our work team here. In fact, I know I am on our senior team. Although we did just promote our CMO, and I think he might be a few years younger than me. But, you know, I am actually the youngest here at the hospital of a group of senior leaders. And, you know, we've all worked our way up. And like I said, I've been here 15 years and I'm very proud of that. And, you know, I go back to that saying of, I think I'm sharper today to do my job than if you had put me in this role and given me the level of responsibility I had even just 5 years ago, right? You grow with experience and you do all of that. So, you know, I wanted to highlight some of these things. I wanted to go through the importance of inclusion. I wanted to go through the importance of really even for folks on the Zoom, you know, if you got yourself in the position of going out there, and whether it's a paid opportunity or even a volunteer position, a lot of times, you know, people aren't necessarily looking to go back full time into our workforce if it's a part-time position or a volunteer role. I think a lot of times today, you know, we all have aspects of wanting socialization, and that looks different for all of us. And there's different reasons we put ourselves back out into our workforce, or, you know, if we've left it for a while for whatever reason, or even if we're still in it and we're deciding, you know, to change and move into a different angle or move into a different career. You know, I think it's really important to, you know, kind of find out, you know, it's that old saying of what's your true north, what's in your heart, what do you want to do, especially when your years of maybe being out in the workforce are maybe more limited, and you really want to use those in a valuable way and do really contribute in a unique or different way based on all the years you've already worked. I think it's healthy to really take a step back and rediscover what that true north is and what you're looking for. I know even at this point, you know, again, you heard me say I kind of had an eclectic career. You know, I started in EMS. I started as, you know, doing emergency medical services. I thought, you know, when I took a night auditor job at Marriott, you know, I ended up in that job, to be honest with y'all. I was looking to be a police officer. I thought I wanted to live in New Jersey, where I was born and raised, and work in the community that I was born and raised as a police officer. And in the interim of testing for that, I got a job as a night auditor. I was working part-time as a 911 dispatcher, and the other part as a night auditor. And, you know, just got the bug in hospitality. And I spent, you know, many years, almost probably as equal now, 15 years or so in hospitality, working for Marriott and Disney. And then again, really had to kind of look at where, you know, my passion was and kind of where I wanted to go. And I missed doing EMS a little bit. And while I passed on being a police officer, I missed that kind of connection with people in a different way. You know, and Amy will probably laugh when I say this, but when I used to be a GM and somebody would say to me, you said it was an ocean view and I can't see it from my bathroom, I would think to myself, well, that's because when we went to the room and designated the scene of what you were going to see, we were on your balcony or we were by your window. You know, I would say to them, we can move your room, we can do all sorts of different things. And of course, at the moment to them, that's important, right? And we would treat it that way and we would respect that. But you can imagine in my role today, when I get a call from a son or a daughter up north and they say, I can't come down and see my mom, they're in your emergency department, and I'm as frightened as I've ever been. And you go downstairs and are able to really help somebody and put a family member at ease and put their mom or dad at ease and let them know that, okay, I know your son or daughter's not here, but you know, you're our family now and we're going to look after you. When you can put a vaccine in somebody's arm, and this has happened to me, and they just break down in tears because you've been able to help them and they were scared and you know, they're you know, concerned about things. You know, I travel from Fort Lauderdale, I told you, to Boca, and I've been doing it for 15 years nonstop. And people say to me, that commute doesn't get old on 95. And I love this hospital and I love what I do. But I even in having this role, as long as I've had, really always try to rebalance and find the purpose, find why I'm doing it. And I want to send that message to you all because I think that, again, that really helps when you're getting yourself out there and you're putting yourself out And sometimes, again, we're talking about, I'm using more professional, right, scenarios, but this can be on community boards. This can be in getting engaged in community committees. It can be getting engaged in Encore and doing what you're doing now. It could be all sorts of things, and how you put yourself out there and promote yourself based on what's truly in here, and the knowledge that's up here are what's gonna keep you, again, really sharp, and keep you engaged, and keep you really of value. And in a professional sense, I gave you examples of Baptist. Most of our highly compensated positions, which I'm really proud to say, are with more mature workforce and people who probably, again, are going to retire out in 5 or 10 years. We certainly do have an intergenerational workforce. We have a lot of very young, talented, great individuals that are coming up in some very high positions as AVPs and really learning and growing. And that's exciting. And we're seeing a lot of that. So, it's a blend. It's a true blend. So I'm going to pause there for a minute. I'm going to take a look at my notes, Karen, and I want to make sure we leave time and give people an open forum. And I know you have some questions for me. And I'm going to take a chance to see and make sure I've covered all of my key things.
Well, thank you, Brian. We'll give you a moment to rest a second while we do thank you for your comments so far and sharing your own personal feelings, the experiences that you've had at the hospital, and also for sharing about your father and his journey, because that's very, it certainly resonates with many people in terms of someone who wants to continue, and going to work is a passion and is pleasurable, for many people. And it sounds like your dad certainly takes great pleasure in continuing to provide great service to his clients, and the clients appreciate that. And thank you for what you do for the families. I know I had a lump in my throat. I'm sure others did when, you take a call from a family member that is worried about their loved one in the emergency room. And that means a lot that you're there. And I'm sure your staff operates similarly. So thank you for that. And we enjoyed your comments as well about the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the efforts that your organization is taking. I know you and I chatted a little bit about some of the programs that you might offer in regards to that, encouraging mentoring between older and younger workers to ensure that as these more experienced folks do perhaps leave the workforce 5 or 10 or so years hence, how are you ensuring that that knowledge is captured to the best of the ability so that they can continue to have their legacy at the hospital? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one of the neat things in our organization is, like I said, or a little bit or alluded to, is that we really do have pathways to have kind of internships or structured kind of programs that will allow some of our younger professionals who are entering to shadow and learn from senior leaders. We do this not only in the formal sense of the word internship externally, but I get a lot of employees that will, like, let's say, work in the laboratory or work in pharmacy, which I'm now the liaison for in that area, that will a lot of times ask if they can shadow and spend time, and will actually put together certain hours a week to spend with them so that they can see what senior leadership's like, or see what leadership in an area they might be interested in looks like. At the senior level, it's really interesting too, because, I look at my CEO, who I said to you, probably has 5 years or so in remaining in his tenure. And the way we meet, formally and informally, he provides a lot of guidance even to somebody like me. I joked, I said, at 50, I'm one of the younger ones on our senior leadership group. And, to be able to get mentored and be able to really get that advice from him and how he would handle situations, or spend time with him when we're rounding the hospital and see how he's interacting and answering questions. It's a very open environment. It also gets even a little more structured, Karen, because one of the things that, again, I like a lot about Baptist is they have a lot of these business engagement advocacy groups. So they'll have very specific interest groups that form and meet together One, to be able to provide a networking opportunity with other people who might have a similar like interest to you, and also to allow for that advancement within our own system. If you think about it from a human resource perspective, it really provides that networking and integration to be able to move from, where I might sit siloed at times at Boca, by doing more of these engagement groups. In fact, this afternoon at 3 o'clock, I'm not sure I'm the smartest for doing this, but at 3 o'clock, I'm going to drive to South Beach because there is a business engagement advocacy group that I'm a part of that is doing an activity down there. And as being one of the executives up here in the North region, I want to network with that group. I want to make the opportunity to meet those people face to face, and some of them I haven't yet, to be able to, have those mentorship opportunities and have more people to reach out to. So through a lot of these channels, through a lot of these structured channels, there becomes also these informal opportunities to really also benefit. So Baptist has done a real good job around that. And again, on the corporate level, they've been part of really, and this is the part I'm most proud of, a lot of organizations, whether again, professionally like mine, community-based, whatever, will claim that, oh, we are very diverse, or we are very this, or we are very that. And there's actionable words, and there's modeling those actionable words. And I think Baptist does a very good job about doing that. You all might be the very first to hear this publicly, but Baptist was just named on the Fortune list as the number 4 top healthcare system to work for. So we've always been in that top echelon, but we made it up to number 4 this year as literally, of all of what Fortune magazine rates, is number 4 best healthcare system to work for. And a lot of that, thank you, a lot of that is because, and by the way, that is again, not just somebody filling out a survey, that's because of modeled actionable items that you have to submit and go through a very strenuous, program to be able to get that Fortune recognition. So, some exciting things around that. I feel like Baptist has done a really good job with that.
Well, congratulations, Brian, on behalf of all of us. And we heard it here first. It's very exciting.
Look for that when it comes out. And for now, you may need to keep that in Vegas. You're the first ones to hear that, but it's such an exciting time. And, when it's so hard to recruit for COVID, think about it. How many people get excited when you say to them, hey, you want to work in a hospital during a global pandemic? Yeah, it's not put on the billboard.
Exactly. Well, that is wonderful because, as you said, it's actionable modeling, and things are really being done, not just words. So thank you for that. We also chatted a bit about having you speak about perhaps any transition programs into retirement, part-time or flexible opportunities. What might you share about that?
Yeah, so what's been very interesting, and again, it's been more of a trend, for those that might have an HR hat on, for the last, probably going on at this point, the last downturn, right? 2008, 2009, may have been driven more originally financially, where people had to stay in the workforce longer. We saw a lot more mature workers not retiring out at 65, based on maybe savings and some of their portfolios at that time, right? So we saw, a lot of people deciding that, their decision was to stay longer. I again think there were some traditional structures, right? You basically said to somebody, well, you're a 40-hour-a-week employee. If you're gonna stay, you're gonna stay. Now, I do preface this to say a hospital is like what, in a sense, what Amy does, with hospitality. It's a 24/7, 365 operation. It sometimes allows us to structure our labor force a little bit differently, where we can look at, do we need that person still 40 hours a week? Is there a capacity to put them in a part-time position? Is there a capacity to put them in a per diem, which is, at work when available kind of position? I've seen more mature workers that maybe held, let's say, a lead job in a department. And maybe they said, you know what, I've done this for so long. Again, my true north is to start transitioning because I want to see my grandkids more. I want to spend time with doing my hobbies more. but I really want to stay sharp. I love working. I love the people I work with. And honestly, where I think even as an HR professional in the past, we would have said, you know what, nope, we need a 40-hour-week employee. I think really there's such a demand for good, again, quality, experts in that sense. And, we talked about how we're not seeing the younger generation give 5 years sometimes. And so, where maybe at some point, and again, I'm not saying this is right, but maybe at some point there was this, approach. I don't want to hire somebody who's a mature worker, who's maybe only going to stay for 5 more years. I don't want to invest in training time and all of that. I think companies, based on what I would say today, is that whole qualified, and let's go beyond qualified. Let's go beyond that percentile of highly engaged, highly talented individuals is so limited. I think smart companies have really realized that you have to put programs, one, in place to hire people that make sense and are going to be attractive to people of different, intergenerational kind of age groups. If you're going to keep them, you have to find ways to motivate them. And again, through social programs, through other, interest programs. I think we've really done here at least a good job of doing that. I think we also have done a much better job, and I think, again, it goes back to that 2008-2009 period of really helping people understand how to plan for that retirement, one, again, financially, but, quite honestly, Karen and team, mental health and mental wellness has become so important to that overall well-being. We used to tell people as HR professionals, save your money. And we never really talked about what happens when you transition to that next stage. What does that do to your, so much of our job is whether purposefully or not. I mean, I probably spend somewhere between, on average, with COVID even more, but let's just talk on average. I don't do less than a 40-hour work week, and I probably average more of about 50 hours of a work week. And sometimes it's more, and yeah, sometimes it's less. But the reality is that if I were to retire tomorrow, that's a lot of time to figure out, and to figure out how do I find that value that I found in all these things that I've talked to you about now for this almost last hour. And I think organizations, including ours, are doing a better job of things like Life Works, and how do you make this new chapter into something that, again, is just a new experience, a new north, a new interest. And I'm definitely seeing the trend where it's not a light switch anymore. It's not somebody saying, I'm retiring next week, Brian, boop, lights out. I'm seeing a lot more of this coming to the table and saying, look, I'm planning on retiring in a year. I would like to be part of, to your point, Karen, helping somebody grow. I have some great people in my department. I would like to help identify a replacement and help train them over the next year and spend time leaving the organization, because we have such tenure that I literally hear that more than ever. I hear people say, I want to contribute to the next leader. I want to be part of that. And it's almost, in a sense, again, you talk about what are we doing? It's good for the organization. And I think I see a lot of times it also helps bring closure to that part of the book for that individual, and allows them that transition and that feeling of, I mean, I can't tell you still how many times somebody will say, I just don't want to leave you, up in the air. I want to make sure I can set you up for success. And I think it's a two-way street, right? I think somebody, a lot of times he's saying it is, it's just such a great person at heart that they're doing it for that reason. And I think there's also that other side of it, of that value, and how do I leave my legacy, and how do I bring this to closure in a way. There's a lot of us, and it's just a humanistic characteristic, right? A lot of us need that closure. A lot of us need that, where does this book chapter turn?
Well, Brian, this has just been wonderful, everything you shared. I'm just going to have to look at my watch now to make sure we have time for questions and answers, and also so you can get safely on the road to South Beach. So I do have another question or two, but what I want to do first is open it up to the group to see if anybody on the call has a question, so we can stay on time. So please feel free if you have a question, unmute. Okay. Rosemary, I can't tell if you're trying to unmute or not. I think I've asked a number of the questions you included, but if there's anything else, you go ahead. And then I will ask one closing question and let everyone else know what's happening next with Encore PBC. So please go ahead.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Brian. Karen probably has a million more questions, but she wants to respect your time, as do I. And you have answered a number of the questions I fed Karen. However, I did want to make an observation, two things. One is I was on a call with the Florida Chamber of Commerce recently, and then another one with the Business Development Board for Palm Beach County. And both of them made the point of the loss of jobs in the hospitality sector. And I'm sure you're aware of that. And that people need to make a transition to other industries and career directions. And making that transition is involves the ability to understand what skills are transferable, how to communicate about them, and so forth. And I don't know whether the hospital is looking at the people in that sector to recruit. That would be one thing. And the second thing, I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with Encore Palm Beach County. We're a nonprofit and we try to be an advocate for mature workers, and also volunteerism as a way of staying engaged. And if you have any suggestions about how we can do a better job of that, I would be happy to hear them.
Well, first of all, Rosemary, those are two great questions that were not on here. So, and you're asking me a really good one about the hospitality industry, because I've always said to Amy, and as you've seen me actually talk to her a couple of times during this, or use that as a parallel. One, hospitality always stays in my blood, so it's still something that's there. I mean, that's what my undergraduate degree is in. It's in hospitality management with a minor in international tourism. So when I went to school as an undergraduate and got a business degree, I got it in hospitality, and had all my other skill sets, right? So to answer your question, the Boca Resort is a big employer here in Boca Raton, right? And they're a large facility, and they do a lot of convention business. And at first they were doing, okay. And then as the year progressed, it got harder and harder for them to hold on to a lot of their catering associates and some of their EVS associates. And we did work with them to try to let them know we had opportunities through our chamber, and communicate and build those relationships, right? Because somebody said it's not all about the years in life, it's about the relationships and the smiles in life. And I'm one of those people that really believes that. I don't believe it's so much your age. I think it's about the people that have come in and out of your life, and the times you've been able to smile and laugh. And we really, really, truly worked closely with them, because we do so many big events, and they're able to handle our events. Our events are usually around like 1,000 people. So, we knew a lot of the relationships there, and my head chef here, long and short of it right now, is from the Boca Resort. And a lot of my sous chefs are from the Boca Resort. We have a lot of people working over in EVS. I want to always be transparent. I think the one thing we could have done and maybe didn't do this time, and we have done this before. In fact, this happened north at Bethesda when I was there. We have that more formalized. So this was more awareness. We sent them our job postings. We told them what we had available. Obviously it was a little different this time, because I think at least at the beginning of this, a lot of those hotels were hoping it was not going to go this long. So nobody was saying, hey, I want to give up all my employees. As it kept going on, it was more like, hey, I'm worried we're going to lose these folks in the market. And then there was also my side of it. where, even having frank conversations with them, they would say, obviously, if we open back up, we'd like to be able to get our folks back. What's that going to do to you? And kind of approached it with the attitude of, what hospital wouldn't be luckier than to have the Boca Raton Resort executive chef working? And by the way, our patients are loving it right now. And they're helping to improve our menus, and they're helping to come up with new ideas, and they're working with our clinical dietitians. So, it may not be a long-term, marriage, but it's going to work out just fine for all of us. So we did this more informally this time. I will tell you, there are formal structured programs that I've seen set up. So like I said, the hospital to the north, Bethesda, when I was with them, literally, and I want to say at that point, it was a Ritz-Carlton up in Manalapan, and they went through a renovation. That's what it was. They had shut down and they had gone through a renovation, and they absolutely did not want to lose their employees. They wanted them back when the renovation was done. And Bethesda they actually had like a contractual relationship with the Ritz-Carlton at that point to bring as many of those employees that fit roles at the hospital that were vacant for that time period until the resort opened. So there are definitely ways to adapt and flow and help with this crisis that we're going through right now. So I hope that answers that question. And then your second question was about volunteerism. So I mentioned, at least for me here, the Debbie Rand Service Memorial League. They are probably, and again, I'm not just saying this, it's definitely actionable, are probably the largest league, at least of any hospital I know of, and the structure that's set up that way. I encourage volunteerism, and if it's not in something like the league like that, and again, there's gift shops, there's thrift shops, there's patient areas, there's non-patient areas. There's basically somewhere for everybody to work to support like a community gem like this. It's a great opportunity. But if that's not what is the right thing for you, I really, and again, I go back to Patricia joining today earlier, I just got excited. She got on and it was just neat to see her and the energy in the whole bit. Find something that is your true north, you're passionate about, and volunteer. And it's not about an amount of time, it's about, just giving of yourself. That's really what I would encourage. And I'm hoping, and I'm sure you do, Rosemary, I'm sure you give outlets to different opportunities that people can, participate in. And honestly, there's a lot that even, and again, I know sometimes it can be a hindrance. I find a lot of these things through social media. I see a lot of postings for different things to do and get involved in the communities. And I think that's a great avenue as well. And again, Patricia was resistant. I know my mom was resistant. And as soon as we showed her an iPad and showed her what Facebook was, I can't get my mother off of Facebook. She's on there more than me. She's more social than I am at this point. So, it goes back to, it's really what we open our minds to and what we're open for. I really do use my parents as an example. My mother resisted, and I got her on a smartphone because she was still using a flip phone. And I wanted to text my mom. To be honest, part of it was a little selfish. I wanted to be able to reach my mom and text her. And she's very capable. My mom is a very young 78. And I said to her, look, this is silly. Just try it. If you don't like it, great. But don't close yourself off to it. And then I would say to her, she actually moved into a 55 and older up in New Jersey, and she couldn't figure out where the Home Depot was. And as soon as I said to her, just say, hey, Siri, where's the closest Home Depot? And Mom, it'll tell you. Or I said to her, you go to the ATM because Mama still likes checks. And some things you're not going to change with somebody. I would say to her, instead of going to the bank to do your checking or whatever, let me show you on the phone what you can do. And sometimes as soon as you open that box, my mom's now doing online Zooms with Brandeis. My mom is now talking to other people and being social. And to be honest with you, again, maybe for selfish reasons, I'm thrilled for my mom. It makes me really happy that I know my mom is staying sharp and being active with people of her interests and her age. And it's great. Does that answer that question, Rosemary?
Yes, Brian, but as everybody who knows me knows, I have an ask also.
Okay. Go for
it. And since
this, Karen.
everybody knows me, yes, when you are talking about it, I was thinking we do have on our website a page where nonprofits and can post volunteer opportunities. And I need a contact with somebody at the Debbie Rand.
I can make
to-
that happen.
And you can email me that afterwards, not the moment, but no
I-
reason why they shouldn't be on our website also.
That's right.
We would
Well,
love
thank
it.
you,
We
Rosemary.
would love
I'll
it.
make sure Brian gets that, and he'll make sure that that person gets that connection, and we can
You guys will love
include
Amy.
those.
She's great. You'd love Amy. She's ahead of that with me.
Amy.
Okay.
Oh, wonderful.
All right. Thank you, Brian.
Yes, and Rosemary, thank you for anybody who doesn't know Rosemary. She is our incredible founder of Encore Palm Beach County. We're so glad to have her, who started this and got us going on this wonderful journey. We also have Marilyn Bieber on the call today. She's one of our board members, as is Christine Cottagio, who a longtime board member who has wonderfully helped with all of these webinars. We couldn't do it without her. We have Amy Mangold, Melissa, Marilyn, Katie from HR Association, Sharon, and Joyce. We're so happy to have you. Hope I didn't miss anybody, but it's just been wonderful. And Brian, thank you for sharing just who you are, sharing your heart with us, sharing your philosophy on leadership. It's been very, very uplifting, and we appreciate you. And we're so glad that you're going to get to go do something now for yourself and do some networking and to continue that personal journey for yourself as well, because you're always doing for others. So we thank you, we applaud you, and we hope everybody will visit us with our next event. You can watch for it as we continue our Wisdom and Experience Works for Business series, which Brian, you have kicked us off beautifully. So thank you so much.
This was great, and I love seeing everybody. It's so good at seeing everyone. And hi, Katie, I'm Melissa. This is great. And if anything
Well,
I
thanks.
can help grow Encore, please let me know. I do think, actually, Rosemary, the reason it'll be nice to share Debbie Rand, I think it goes both ways. I think there are a lot of folks that would benefit from even what you all are doing and would enjoy stuff like this. I think it's going to be a win-win.
Well, we can always have a conversation about that.
Sounds great.
All right. Thank you again, Brian. Thanks, everyone. Y'all have a wonderful afternoon.